Welcome to our last day of training, Friday, July 21st. Good afternoon in Africa and good morning here in the United States. We are excited to share with you information on our last day of training, and we're about to introduce our first speaker. I'd like to welcome Carolyn Kinkoff to this training. Carolyn, welcome to the training.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. It's nice to see you.
And you can begin. I'll be continually admitting people in.
All right, very good. I am here to talk to you today about coalition building. My name is Carolyn Kinkoff. I am the survivor mother of a human trafficking victim. And I formed a nonprofit here in the United States called the Alliance Against Human Trafficking. So who is in my coalition? It's community leaders, law enforcement, fire, EMS, healthcare providers, families, and members of the community, because people often don't understand when adults and children are being victimized, which leads to missed opportunities. That's why the co-founders and I formed the Alliance Against Human Trafficking to raise awareness, because raising awareness is the first step in prevention. And it's important for us to also protect victims by raising awareness and by partnerships and bringing the whole community together. That can include businesses, hotels. Here in the United States, I do training for realtors, politicians, lawyers, healthcare. And if it's very difficult if you don't have resources in order to build a coalition, but I'm here to tell you that each and every one of you has the power to make change, to identify victims, to be first identifiers, first responders, and to work together to educate your communities and everybody in your community who needs to wrap around services for these victims and survivors. So the first thing I want to tell you is about my daughter, Courtney. So please, next slide, please. This is my daughter, Courtney. She's the reason I continue to fight to raise awareness to prevent human trafficking from happening to another victim or another family. She was found dead in Cleveland in an abandoned apartment last year after she went missing from a group home that treated mental illness and substance use clients. 3 police officers saw her before she was found deceased, and they didn't know what to do to help her because she was an adult, and they didn't understand that she was unable to care for herself. There are a lot of stigmas around mental illness and substance use, and it's really important for us to all talk about this because there's often an intersection between such vulnerabilities and other vulnerabilities in human trafficking, as I'm sure you've heard all week from your previous trainings. Courtney was trafficked out of residences, multiple group homes, treatment centers, including hospitals and a nursing home because her mental illness was so severe, hotels, strip clubs. And after years of waiting for housing here in the United States in hopes of gaining some independence, she was finally approved for her own apartment through the system we were working with, but it was too late. Next slide, please. So we're talking about the who, what, when, why, where. And the first slide, I told you why I built a coalition. Now, who? I gave you some ideas of the partners that are important, but the most important person in all of this is you, to build a multidisciplinary team. The goal is to save lives, and awareness can save lives. It's important to reach people who don't know because education is a means for prevention, identification, and possibly providing resources when needed. So you might be thinking, okay, this is great. You're in America, you have resources. Well, let me tell you, I work for the state. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a lot of money. And I have $0 for my coalition. So everything you'll see on all of these slides and all of the work I've been doing for my daughter has been provided by me working hard by myself and by building relationships and partnerships. And anything I've contributed financially has come from me. And you don't need money to network. You don't need money to work with the hospitals and work with all the providers and businesses in your community. So that leads me to a multidisciplinary approach, which means you take all of the different disciplines, as you probably know, and you work together. But what I'm trying to do now is more of an interdisciplinary approach. I'm trying to get all of those different agencies who are working separately and coming together to talk about what they're doing to start working more together. That includes local, county, state, federal, and even global agencies, like some of those that are here today. Seek out others in your field, along with those who work with youth and adults, victims and survivors, and those at risk. I will tell you, it takes a community, and the biggest difference, in my opinion, is when people work together locally with the support of states or territories, then at the country level. The grassroots efforts make a huge difference, and we all support each other. Because once you find somebody who is doing the same work that you're doing and cares about this as much as you do, as tough as this work is, you will find some support systems that may surprise you. And I'm going to say this over and over again, everyone must work together and have a similar understanding of what to do and what resources are available or needed. Human trafficking awareness and skills training. So for protection officers, you need skills. Ensure that human trafficking is combated more effectively in Ohio and around the world. We believe that training empowers professionals with skills to provide much needed support of human trafficking victims through their respective service organizations and agencies. Raising awareness and providing anti-human trafficking education reduces barriers with both understanding and communication, while promoting the coordination of efforts within and across systems to build those interdisciplinary teams. Now, before we move on, I want to tell you, I'm going to go off script because that's always more exciting. The picture you see here was an effort between me, and I work for Cleveland State University in Ohio, the police department here at the university, all of the leadership, a local real estate company who did donate money for this training because I had to hire trainers or experts to come in because I don't know law enforcement operations. I don't know law enforcement interdiction. And that training was provided by funding that was raised by reaching out to people who did have money to contribute towards this cause. I did it in honor of my daughter, Courtney, shown here. And we had almost 200 police officers come to that training, along with healthcare professionals and advocates. And it was phenomenal. And there were several officers who didn't know what human trafficking looked like. They didn't think it was happening in their community. They thought it was happening somewhere else over there. But I'm telling you, it can happen anywhere. Go ahead with the next slide, Renee.
Okay.
And here is an example. This is my favorite slide. Here is an example showing some of the partnerships that I've just been telling you about. So when I tell you, you can build a support system, and if you find people who are like you who want to fight this, this is an example shown through pictures. So there I am with Miss Renee Jones at a benefit for raising money for her center so she can do all of the amazing, incredible work she does with her team. There's a picture of us doing a training for realtors, those selling real estate in our local community, because we have abandoned homes and we have other places where realtors could be first identifiers, just like protective services. Politicians, there was a politician who, his name is he's a US Congressman, Dave Joyce. He pulled all of the leaders in Ohio together who combat, not all of them, but several leaders in Ohio who combat human trafficking, to have a roundtable discussion about healthcare and what could be done in our local community. It was actually Lake County, which is where I live. So the states are similar to territories. It's bigger than a city. I know that the jurisdictions are a little bit different. And then Bowling Green State University is another university where we held a human trafficking training about public health, because it's a public health crisis. It's a social justice crisis. And then the bottom right, you'll see Miss Renee Jones did a podcast with me and featured my daughter's art. She was an artist. And I got to share my story and why it's important, not only for the community to recognize what's happening with victims, but also to recognize that families are impacted too. It affects everyone, and we all have to work together. Next slide. So this is a map of the coalitions in Ohio, and we all work together and do, but everybody provides different services. So some coalitions do not provide direct services. They simply raise education. They may provide clothing or food or shelter, and others just connect. So for example, I am not a direct service provider. So if anyone calls me for resources, I refer them either to the Renee Jones Empowerment Center or to healthcare or to mental health care for a variety of needs or resources. But there are parts of these coalitions that are part of task forces. There are educators who do research. So we have a problem with illicit massage businesses here in the United States, and I'm sure they're around the world, but it's labor and sex trafficking. So in order to inform what resources are needed, a lot of universities do research in order to find out what resources are needed. Because if we don't study what's happening and where it's happening, that makes it very difficult. And I'm sure you've learned that victims don't always identify. So if they're not identifying, we're not getting the data, and then we can't have data to find out what resources are needed. Sometimes they're missing, sometimes they're homeless. And it's really important for everybody in all the different fields to work together and not be judgmental. So sometimes law enforcement think, okay, what are you going to do at a university? You can't, we're out here doing the work. It's true, you are, but there's different kinds of work that can be done that we can help support you to do the work that you do. So this is my contact information. I know we have much more to talk about, but I wanted to leave this with you. You can reach me with any questions after this at allianceagainstht@gmail.com. And I listed the website where the coalition map can be found, but you can also see there's gaps in services. So anything that doesn't have a color assigned to it, there's 88 counties in Ohio. And this is, just this one state, similar to your territories. You can see that there's a gap that Ashtabula and Portage and Geauga up in the right corner, the whole kind of east side of the state, there's gaps in services. And that means that nobody's connected or connecting all of these resources to pull them together because they haven't built a coalition yet. So not only do we have to build coalitions at our local level, I'm this pink one up here in the top right corner that says Lake, but not only do we have to build within our cities and our counties and our states, but like I said, federally. So Homeland Security is involved, the FBI is involved, and those are all at the federal level. They go beyond Ohio. But traffickers don't pay attention to jurisdiction. They don't pay attention to whether my daughter lived in one county and was transferred to another, or one city and taken to another city. And she was actually trafficked all over the country. So not only was my daughter, so I mentioned there's 88 counties in Ohio. She was trafficked in Cuyahoga, Lake, Ashtabula, and Summit. So 4 of those counties. And she was also trafficked in several states. She was moved from Ohio to Pennsylvania, to Michigan, to New Orleans, Minnesota, California, and I don't know if I mentioned Michigan, and also Colorado. So 8 states. My daughter was trafficked in 8 states from her accounts to me. But sadly, she wouldn't talk to law enforcement. She would not share her story with them because she was afraid of community backlash. And that's a real fear. These traffickers don't want anyone to stop them from selling someone and making money off of that. They don't want someone to stop them from selling drugs and people if there's an intersection between those two. So it's really important for all of you to work together so that if somebody goes outside of your jurisdiction, outside of your district, outside of where you work, that you have those connections so that the traffickers can't escape penalties because they are one step ahead of law enforcement. So that's what I want to share about coalitions. And then Renee, you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
That was your last slide.
Oh, is that the last? Oh, I thought there was a 6 with Renee Jones. Is that just yours?
Oh, that's
The questions.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is make sure that people that, because we just had other people joining, to make sure that they know if you have a question about a coalition, creating one, developing them. Carolyn is really we're so happy to have her here because I wanted you to see how she started this as just one person. And so if you have a question for her, type it in the chat box so that we can ask her those questions while you have her available to answer questions. This is really powerful that one person would use the death of her daughter to be determined to get out and fight this crime. And she's doing a pretty magnificent job in what she has been able to accomplish and develop. This coalition is amazing. So if you have a question, type it into the chat box. While we're waiting for people to type in questions, Carolyn, can you kind of share some of the trainings and some of the how you do your monthly or how you do your meetings?
Oh, absolutely. And I was going to mention that too. I'm glad you said that because that popped into my head as you were talking was about trainings. So first, I want to tell you there are resources available. So I mentioned that this shows the map of Ohio. I found through the state of Ohio, they had this map of, I looked up this map and said, okay, what's happening in Lake County? And there was nothing listed. So it said how to build a coalition. They literally have step-by-step, who do you involve? What do you do? So if you go to the Ohio, if you just look up Ohio Anti-Human Trafficking Coalitions and you find the site that has this map, it says, how do you build a coalition? And I used that as my roadmap. There are trainings available for everyone. I connect with trainers all over Ohio, all over the country, all over the world. That first one, Renee, could you go back to the 3rd slide, please? The one training that I showed you all, that I talked about bringing in 180 law enforcement officers. I brought in the former Missouri Attorney General Director and a former police officer who worked for the state of Missouri as a state trooper. So his jurisdiction covered the entire state of Missouri. I brought them in to do the training because they had the skills and they had the experience and they had the resources. But the trainers' names are Dan Nash and Allison Phillips. They train all over the world. So if you are interested in interdiction or operations training, like more specific to law enforcement, that shows those, those types of like what needs to be done for skills. They've trained in Moldova and other places, Border Patrol. So it's fantastic. And of course, Miss Renee Jones is teaching all over the world too. But their trainings, they work with other law enforcement officers. There's in In Las Vegas, they have an annual conference where they teach law enforcement officers all across the United States in partnerships with other teams. But as far as locally, what I do, I go to all the trainings that I possibly can for any of the local advocacy agencies. So when Ms. Renee Jones has a training, if I can attend or if I can come and present, I'm always happy to partner with her for that. We do bi-monthly trainings for my coalition. It's called the Alliance Against Human Trafficking. And what we do is we bring in I mentioned I'm not a direct service provider. So victims and survivors don't come to me to say, okay, do you have food or shelter? I don't, or healthcare or medical or mental health care or substance use, but I refer them to other agencies. I don't have a physical building. But I bring people who do have physical building, who are in our community. And I say, okay, come tell everybody else in the community what you do and how you can help them. So just yesterday, I do want to share one training that I did, and it was for school resource officers. So Ohio had an event for all of our 88 counties. It was called Operation Bridge, and it was to bring community members together regarding substance use and to avoid incarcerating victims or people with substance use or mental health issues or human trafficking victims, but rather to do outreach for resources. So we had 80 officers there from our county, so I hosted the Lake County event, and I received the biggest compliment, in my opinion, that I could receive from a police officer. And this is what they said. Thank you for your talk and presentation yesterday. I thought your alliance did a great job, and it was a very informative day. I was aware human trafficking was a big issue, but I did not know too many specifics. Thanks to yesterday, I feel much more confident that I would be able to help stop one or more situations from occurring. Prevention is key. It saves lives. And each one of you here can be that one that can recognize and stop one or more situations from occurring. You can be proactive and prevent. And most of the time in law enforcement, I understand you have to be reactive. But if you can, the one thing I want to leave you with before I answer questions, if there are any, is self-confidence. If I could gift any child around the world something, if I could make a wish and they could all have one thing, it would be self-confidence. And I know some people might think peace or money or whatever, but if they don't have the self-confidence to guide their life, to stand up for themselves.
Oh, did I meet you?
I got it. Even if nobody else stands up for a child, if they have self-confidence, they can report to a trusted adult. So it's also important to teach your youth who the trusted adults are. And I can also tell you that traffickers can be anyone, buyers can be anyone. So it's really important. It could even be a family member. So it's really important to build self-confidence in our children so that as they become adults, they aren't more vulnerable and more susceptible to being trafficked at any stage in their life. So with that, I'd like to open up and answer any questions that you might have. And if there's still, if there's something, if you just want to make a comment or say, I didn't know this, or could you talk a little bit more about that? Anything you'd like to know? Yes, let's see.
That's me. It's not, it's an invitation.
To rebuild self-confidence, actually. So there is remember how I told you about educators? There is an educator. Her name is Dr. Celia Williamson. And she has created an at-risk program for youth, for girls. It's an 8-week course for girls. And she teaches people how to talk. And trafficking can happen to boys, girls, men, women, but she focuses on girls because, and that's where I found a lot of the information from self-esteem. I paid for her course with my own money. It was $400 so I could learn. to teach students about what they need for self-confidence. I actually have a video of some of what I teach for her training that I'm happy to share with Miss Renee, and I might even be able to put it in the chat, but it's a YouTube video. So if you have access to YouTube, it is something that I would recommend. It's less than 30 minutes, and it talks about physical safety, emotional safety. I believe there's a little snippet or a slide of what I talk to youth about, because it was actually a college presentation. It's called Coffee with the Cops. And I will list that. Give me 1 second. And you can watch it at your leisure. And it'll tell you a little bit about what children can do to be mindful and to be aware of their physical safety, and that they have the right to feel safe, and consent, that no means no, even if they're in a loving relationship. And I understand there are cultural differences, so I don't mean to impose my cultural beliefs if that's the case. However, that's what I teach kids. No means no, even if you're in a loving relationship. You have the right to walk away if you're not comfortable with what's happening, and but you have to leave the situation, because if you stay, it's more likely that something could happen if you can leave safely. Give me 1 second here. Oh, it's not showing up. Coffee. Let's see.
And if you can't get it, Carolyn, you can send it to me and I will make sure
Yeah.
that we send it out.
I got it. Please kindly
Got
share
it.
the name in full and the training and subject. Okay, I can do that too.
Okay.
Am I able to comment too? I think so. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. So that's the YouTube. And then Dr. Celia Williamson is the other reference. And she has a screening toolkit that's fabulous, that you can download for free, I believe. And it's questions that you can ask. And we shared that at our resource officer training yesterday. So let me find her, Dr. Celia Williamson, at risk youth. Yep, here it is. I'm going to give you the link to the tool. There you go.
Perfect.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Is there any other questions?
She's following.
Oh, you're following. Okay. Well, I would, since I'm going to ask you a couple questions, because
Of course.
if you have any questions, I want you to share what is the importance of having community members and even victims or survivors being involved in a coalition.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's the biggest part. And I should have incorporated that in my presentation. So whenever I do a training, I bring in a survivor to speak about their experience or to talk about what they want others to know, because not every survivor wants to talk about their trauma. They don't want to have a trauma dump. They are so much more. So when I think of survivors, this is how much of their life is victimization. This, I mean, it just goes, infinity, like so much more it is what they are as a person. And I love that Miss Renee has named her center the Empowerment Center, because that's what it's all about. It's about empowering survivors, because they can inform the law enforcement, the community can talk about, they can disclose, they can talk about what's happening. They have a passion and a fire to want to help, not only the community members, but also survivors. So whenever I bring a survivor, it's always important for me that they get paid. So we have laws here in the United States in Victims of Crime Act. I'm not familiar with the global funding for all of that, but I think the rate of pay is $87 an hour. So even though I don't make a lot of money, anytime I've ever had a survivor speak at any of my events, I have paid them $100 to speak to the community members, because I don't want to further exploit them. And their stories are each unique, and we have to listen to survivors in order to know what they need. We can't assume what they need. We can't judge. We need to listen to them because they can teach us. And the only reason I know what I know is because my daughter taught me. And what she couldn't tell me because of her mental illness and when she was using substances, I went out to the community and to advocates and other groups with trusted trainings. That's very important. They have to be accurate and true. You can't just, you'll get false information, especially from some of the sensationalized, different social media posts. So make sure you get your training from accurate sources. And it's very important to work with survivors because that builds their self-confidence too, like we were talking about. And I see some comments. You're welcome for the video. You're welcome for this presentation. Thank every one of you for being here, because I really believe you're going to take this information, and I wouldn't be shocked if you reach out to Miss Renee Jones after this and say, this really made a difference and here's what happened. And I trust that you will all make a difference in somebody's life or multiple lives.
So Carolyn, the other thing I wanted you to share a little bit about, I'm glad that you brought up about how survivors are involved, because I want people to know a coalition is very important, because this issue is so big, no one agency can do it by themselves. If you want to make impact, you have to come together in a really organized manner, and you can attack it in a really powerful way when you do things like that. And we're going to talk about building a coalition later on and how people can do it. But I wanted you to share, you shared about the training, you shared about where you are, the location where you're located. I want you to emphasize this is a community so that they can relate it in Africa to maybe a village. This is not, you're not in the big city of Cleveland.
No.
You're in the suburbs. So share the impact that you've made in your community that they can utilize in a village.
Okay, so I want to talk very specifically about something that is a little bit taboo to talk about, and but it just points to how insidious this is and how people don't understand what it is, and people will turn a blind eye to it unless you educate your community or local territories. Excuse me. We had a council person in my community where my daughter was raised, where my husband graduated from school, where all of I practice my faith in this community. We had a council person who is a local government leader, actually the president of that council that makes all of the decisions for this little city where I live. And he was caught attempting to buy sex and arrested. And some of the local community people, social media were saying, oh, it's no big deal. It's two consenting adults. He was hiring a prostitute. No, it's not two consenting adults. Human trafficking, it's often victims who are under the influence of substances, or they're coerced, or they're forced into that life. And I can tell you that, like for Courtney, because of her mental illness, she could not consent. She could not say yes, and then add drugs to that, and that further impaired her. So I took that opportunity to go to my council meetings and say, this is not acceptable. And he stepped down from being the president. Sadly, they have not removed him yet from office. But part of that is not making excuses. They are on summer break, but we have to keep fighting, and we have to fight at a community level, but we each have a part to play. So we have to follow the laws, we have to follow the rules, but we also have to expect our local leaders to follow those same rules, because if there's corruption, and I'm not saying there's corruption, but if there is corruption, you know, in different areas, this wasn't hidden. He wasn't like stealing money for them from the city. So when I say corruption, I don't mean that. I just mean if it's accepted, then that's not okay. Because then if it's accepted for one person to do it, other people think it's okay to do it. But it's almost like, I studied psychology, and it's almost like a mob mentality. So if there's a group of people and somebody's being attacked, law enforcement and nurses will run forward. Or if there's a gunshot or a fire, fire department, provided they have their gear on, everybody's going to run forward, who is EMS or first responder. Everybody else just stands by and videotapes or watches or scoffs or ignores it and thinks it's no big deal. We have to stop allowing individuals to accumulate in that sense and have that mob mentality. People need to understand that they can be the one person to affect change. There's only one caveat to that. It's really important for anybody who's not trained law enforcement not to get involved with a domestic violence situation or a trafficking situation, and rather to call police or call law enforcement, or somebody of authority who can help, because otherwise, like I said, the traffickers, they don't want anybody else to get involved, and you could put yourself in harm's way. So that was something that was really difficult for me as a mother, was because, believe me, I went everywhere looking for my daughter, and I probably went to some areas that weren't safe for me. Not that it was a bad neighborhood, but people were getting shot, and there was a young woman where my daughter was sighted at a gas station who went missing, and there was a bullet hole in her car, and she's still missing. So it can be a very dangerous situation. So the community that I live in is a very small community, but I really had to open people's eyes. So when that happened with the council person, it just reinforced how hard I have to fight, because it made me realize that even as much as I do, people still don't understand what human trafficking is and the victimization that goes along with it. So it was really important for me to bring the school resource officers in. Another reason too was because we had a teacher who sexually assaulted a student. So in my community, in my city, so not everything is human trafficking, but we have to teach our community members and our school teachers and be in the schools to tell them, this is what exploitation looks like. Exploitation, when children are being groomed, or adults, can lead to human trafficking victimization. So we have to be sextortion. We have to be aware of all the crimes that are involved. There could be forced criminality. Sometimes youth and adults are forced to commit crimes rather than having sex to make money. They might have to steal or rob in order to bring their quota in for the day. So that was kind of long-winded, but that's why it's so important to teach the community, because just when you think you're making a difference and people understand, there's going to be one person or more people who still need to hear that message so that their eyes can be open and they can see what human trafficking really looks like.
Thank you, because I think I wanted people to really understand how they can, when you have limited resources, the power of a coalition and getting
Yes.
the word out. I remember specifically this incident that you referred to, how the people came together and they were outside the courtroom when this man was being, when this came out, and they talked to the news media. So what happens is, and I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, but I thought
Sure.
that was powerful.
Yes. So I was very angry that a local leader who was making decisions for me and for my community, because I'm a constituent, I vote, and this is an elected official who is making laws for the city where I live and not protecting the children because he's engaging in this activity that could harm other people. So I gathered as much support as I could, and I contacted the media, and the news came. And I have a dear friend who is a human trafficking survivor, and I invited her to come to the meeting because she works in my city. And I said, this is not acceptable and we have to fight this. And we did. And it was because of that effort in bringing the community together, and all of us showing up, several of us showing up at that meeting, that we got the attention, not just of our local community, but some other communities that surrounded us that said, this is not okay. And we're going to fight this, and please do something about this, because this is happening here and we need to stop this. And that was, it was after that event that he stepped down as the president of that council, because we wouldn't, that's all they could do at the time, from what I understand, until his court case concluded. So, it was the only action that we could take. And like I said, everybody has a role. So that was the best that we could do. So we did everything we could to make that happen.
And I wanted to share that because I want people to understand that didn't cost any money.
No,
That came because you educated the community about this crime. And that's where you make an impact, because you're empowering the people in the community. And then
Right.
they begin to come together, and this is what has to happen with this issue, where your community, your village, they know about it. You inform them, you educate them, and they will come together and not tolerate it. I remember seeing that on the news, and I was so proud of the work that you have been doing, because that was a community that really didn't think that they had human trafficking in their community. And so I just thought, during this training, we wanted to share as much information as possible, especially things that people can do that don't require funding. I mean, we need funding for different things when you have training, but the education part is not. You don't need that. You take your knowledge and you share it. You share the resources that you're given. You learn everything that you can. You educate the people that are around you. And I really appreciate that you shared all of this information. I don't know if you have any questions in the chat.
Oh, let me take a look.
Okay.
There's none.
Nope. Just a
Okay.
thank you. And you are very welcome.
Okay, well, I thank you for taking time out of your schedule. We really appreciate it. I'm grateful for all that you do to educate the people in your community and in all of the things that we've been able to partner with. And I really thank you for joining us today for this training.
And I thank you for having me. And I'm so grateful to have you in my life, and to call you a friend, and to have your support, and to work with you and Tracy. We do have one question after all.
Okay.
What would it take to convince community members that are still blinded to thinking that human trafficking is not their problem, and are indifferent to such concerns because they think that their family or those close to them are immune to such? Well, that's where I bring a unique perspective. Not everybody is able to talk about the their own victimization, or the victimization of their loved ones or family members. But if people start to disclose to law enforcement, and there's prosecution, and you get the legal teams to work together to have consequences for the people who are committing these crimes, then you certainly want to protect the victims and the victims' rights, but you also want these people, the perpetrators, to be held accountable. And what the Ohio Attorney General does is they broadcast when people are arrested for attempting to buy sex. So they don't expose the victims, but they expose the criminals. And then people say, oh my gosh, 6 people just got arrested in my community. Oh my gosh, 5 people just got arrested in my community, and one was a council president. So that's where not everybody likes the media. But if there is a local newspaper or a reporter or a TV station or somebody who can share factual information, and it has to be reliable and not sensationalized, and using the right terminology, and not calling victims prostitutes, that's how you raise awareness in your communities. you show them that it's happening there, but not at the expense of the victims. You show them as law enforcement officers by, sharing, like, that's how the Ohio Attorney General does it. And some law enforcement officers don't want people to know what's going on because you have to be very careful not to expose it until after the investigation portion is over. So it's like, it might be not old news, but delayed news, because you certainly don't want to jeopardize any investigations. But it's proof. It's proof. It's news articles, like our Ohio State Highway Patrol and the Human Trafficking Task Force just arrested a predator in Ashtabula, and it was on all the news stations. So if you have a local news station that will talk about these crimes that are happening in your local communities, but if you have churches or groups of faith or schools, bringing in, learn to teach yourself, or bring in organizations or advocates who do teach factual information, and gather those communities together and invite them. And at first it might just be a few people, but then it will grow and it will build. And if you can just get a few people to understand that it's happening in their community, they can teach other people that it's happening in their community. So like here, it says advocates, nonprofits, universities, and faith-based groups. Your universities could teach about human trafficking. And like I said, it's difficult when they don't report and we can't get the data, but if we can get the data where it's happening, then we can inform and see what resources are needed. So there's some information you might not be able to share, but if you have a governing body of law enforcement for a group of territories, and you could all kind of like maybe come together and work together and say, okay, this is happening at this hotel, let's work together. Or it's crossing these territory lines, or this person lives here but they're victimizing someone there. You're all going to have to work together and raise awareness. That's the only way you're going to convince your communities what's happening. You may have to educate a whole lot of people, because that's what I had to do. I had to educate my daughter's doctors, her nurses, her mental health care providers, and even the police. I had to hire a private investigator and have I had to pay myself for digital forensic evidence to be done, because the police didn't believe me and didn't have the tools or the resources to investigate what was happening. And I think we have another question. Apart from raising awareness, do you have reporting mechanisms? If yes, how effective is it? And do you get feedback? Yes. So we have human trafficking. We have a regional human trafficking task force. So that regional human trafficking task force covers several of the 88 counties in Northeast Ohio where I am. We call one number for police, and then within 30 minutes, a detective from that special task force calls back somebody who's reported a suspected human trafficking victimization. So then those police make those reports, and then the human trafficking task force reports to the Ohio Attorney General's office that oversees all. That's where the prosecutor is for the entire state of Ohio, and the legal director, and they get the reports for all 88 counties. And then they can take that data and use it to inform for resources, but they don't release it to the public. Certainly that's not a public record. Also 911, we have a number that is an emergency number for, it's all across the United States. If somebody dials 911, no matter where they live, the local police department will answer the phone, or a dispatcher from a community to send police to that location. So technology is actually beneficial. I mean, I know some of the poor villages may not have that technology, but I'd love to learn more about how policing works where you are, because and if anybody needs to bounce some ideas or say, okay, we don't have a telephone system, but this is how it works, I would be happy to listen to you. I'm not a consultant. I can't, I'm not an attorney, but I'm certainly happy to listen and help if there's anything I can do, if you have some ideas, and I can tell you if it's anything like what we've done, or but your community's best. So you'll have to think outside the box and be creative to figure out what to do to start up that reporting.
Are there any more questions in the chat?
Nope,
Okay.
that's the last question.
Okay, well, I thank you for answering
Of
that question.
course.
But I felt it was a great opportunity to share this information and to encourage people to don't be discouraged because you don't have a lot of resources. Use what you have and how effective you have been. And so I thank you again for joining us today, taking time out your schedule. It's really important, and we will definitely be tapping into you more with the global initiative on other items that we're working on. So thank you, Carolyn. Let's give Carolyn a hand. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna stick around. I'm just gonna, take myself
Good.
off camera. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay, let's get down here. So this is good because we want to make sure that fair right into, we want to make sure that you understand how to develop a coalition. Part of our global initiative is to do just that with countries that we're going to work with. Because the bottom line is no one organization can do it the way that you're going to affect change when you have trafficking in the thousands. If you've got to bring everything that you have on board. Every person that offers any type of service, you have to be able to come together to see what is available and what you have available and what's needed. And you will only know that by seeing what's available in your area. As I have reviewed the chats and these 5 days of training, I've seen the different places that I may not understand all of the services, but it was interesting to see the different organizations that were online. And I don't know if everybody knows, if you're in the same place, if you know that these places exist. Sometimes we're here and in the United States, that's why we have a collaborative and we have a coalitions like that. Because sometimes, a lot of times, we're meeting people for the first time. We had no idea that they provided any type of service. And that is why this is so valuable. It helps us with outreach efforts. That is how we get new people to join our outreach. And there's power in numbers. You're able to do more. You're able to affect more change. You're able to bring more information into the community that you serve. And so we want to make sure that you understand the benefit of developing a coalition. And I wanted to go a little bit more into it so you can understand what it is. In its most basic form, a coalition, this is a group of individuals and or organizations, as Carolyn shared, who have a shared interest and they agree to collaborate towards a common goal. Everybody on this line is working in the field of human trafficking in your job, in your community, and all of the people that we've had presenting to you this week. The objective could be as specific as gaining funds for a specific remedy. Sometimes we have to attack something and we need funding. And it's easier to do when you have, you're working with someone that has a proven track record of accomplishing goals. That's where funders are looking at. What are you able to do? So sometimes when you have a big issue, that's a really good thing when you have a coalition, because you can work together with other organizations to make things happen. So I wanted you to understand the definition of that. So we are collaborative. The objective could be, again, as specific as gaining funds or changing the overall quality of life for the majority of people in the community. Or depending on the scope of the issue, the persons and the organizations involved, it may be recruited from a restricted field of interest. In our case, is human trafficking awareness, shelters and services for victims, human trafficking prevention and awareness, or may even include representatives from practically every element of the community that Carolyn just shared. She showed how her coalition, how they have law enforcement, they have medical professionals, they have lawyers, they have people from all parts of the community, as well as community members and even survivors. And having a survivor of human trafficking on your coalition is wonderful, because they're the ones that have the most valuable information to help you fight this crime. Their story alone tells you what the situations were, and they're all different, but it helps you to build effective programs. It helps to build up the person that's been victimized, to let them know they have value. As she shared with you, the advocates that she has that come to these meetings and speak, or they're at the trainings, she makes sure that they're compensated for their time. And we have had some amazing survivors who are doing some great things. And that's what makes it a reality to the community that you're serving. As long as we just say numbers and talk like that, when people see real lives being impacted and they hear from someone that has been a victim of this crime, it makes a huge difference, and it makes a greater impact. So that's, I want you to understand that. Coalition, move this up a little bit. Coalitions' objectives can be as diverse as the coalitions themselves. You know, you can have several. You may have one that just focuses on when the problem is so big. You may have to have ones that focus on certain areas, but they're all worth the effort. You can be involved in influence of shaping public policy. I love the example that Carolyn gave about the person in their council who was in this position, making the decisions about the community. And here he is being involved in this type of situation. And the fact that because of the awareness that had taken place in that community, people were not standing for that. They came together in the news media, and it made an impact. He had to step down. And still, somebody let me. Okay. The other thing is it establishes a healthy community. And this term generally refers to both the physical health or the community health, which may include not only medical or preventive or wellness services, but also the social and psychological health of the community, which includes diversity, education, the culture and arts, which we talked about earlier this week, violence prevention, youth development, employment, economic development, mental health, and other human services, and so on. So you really, a lot of things can be accomplished. You can focus on specific areas, but it's a very powerful tool to use, and it's what we're going to use in our global initiatives. To convene a successful coalition, there's some things that you need to be aware of and you need to do because if you want it to be effective. Number one, you have to develop a one-to-one relationship with every coalition member in your coalition. You have to learn how to resolve conflicts. You have to learn how to enlist members' active support. Everybody that's involved in Carolyn's, I'm really, really impressed with her coalition because it's just a few people. It started with just her. But the people that are working with her are very involved. And some of them, one of the ladies has actually joined us many times on our street outreach efforts. And so it's just really good to see how you can get people involved and get their support. So don't be discouraged because, you know, this is something new and people may not get involved at first, but if you keep doing it, they will get involved. Comprehending each group's self-interest, make sure that everyone in the coalition's interest is addressed and help to translate them into solid programs. Because sometimes we have a lot of different things, but they're not effective. One thing that we do is review our programs. Human trafficking victims and survivors that come into the center have great input into what we're doing. If it's not working and it's not effective, we're not going to do it. Same thing with outreach. If it's not working, it's not effective, we're not going to do it. We're not there to sell things. we only invite agencies that bring services and resources that are free because the people don't have money. So we are not looking for anyone that has, charging for something. So these are things that will help you have a successful coalition. There's also several reasons why forming a coalition is very important. And I just want to share those. It's a smart idea. If you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results. This is what I tell everybody. If you want to see something different, you got to do something different. Otherwise, you're just going to see the same thing over and over. So I'm a big believer in, I love to think outside the box. I love to try innovative ideas. I love to do things that involve people that would normally not be involved, because what I have found is they are some of the people that have the best input. So it is a smart idea to have a coalition. In general, it focuses on the community, it focuses the community's attention on a specific problem. Where you are, people may know it happened, but I bet you there's a lot of people that are not aware that it's such a huge problem as it is. So it forges coalitions among persons who might not ordinarily collaborate or keep the community's response to challenges consistent. Consistency is the key. If you're not consistent, you won't see great change. So that's a really important thing to remember. When you are tackling a community issue, consistency is very vital. As we shared with you the other day about our outreach, the people know when we're coming to a specific area. They are there. They know that we're consistent, whether it's rain. Here we have, summers, winter, and fall. So the weather changes. Sometimes it's extremely hot, and other times it's freezing with snow. And sometimes there's really a lot of rain. But in every state, in every case, we are there on the days that we say that we're there, because some people are living on the street. I remember one situation when we were at our first location that we started outreach at, and it began to pour rain. And the people that were there, they said, well, should we pack up and leave? And I thought, no, the people were still out on the street. I'm like, the people are living out here, so we're gonna stay here. And everybody stayed. And what you do is you set the tone with whatever you do. And when you're starting something new, you set the tone, and people know now at all the 5 locations where we are, they know that that's what we're doing. We're not going to be deterred by different things like that. We're going to stay out there. We're going to keep our word, and we're going to do what we need to do. So, muted here. If you are unmuted, please mute your microphone so that we can continue. Now, there are obstacles to forming a coalition. And I want people to be aware, because whenever you're trying to do something new or trying to do something that's going to be impactful, there are obstacles. So you always have to be aware of what are the obstacles. There are frequently hurdles to forming a coalition, and it's critical to be aware of and anticipate them, since they may determine the path that the coalition may take in order to be successful. And among those are turf problems. So we say turf, that means territorial, where people are like, there is their territory, and they just they're only concerned about what they're doing. Organizations are frequently cautious about disclosing their work, who their target groups are, and notably who their funders are. So starting a coalition may require convincing a lot of organizations that work together that they'll all benefit from them and better handle their common challenges. When you come together, you're going to work together, and you're going to be able to handle some of these things that are common challenges. If you have a bad track record, there are organizations, individuals, or the community as a whole may have had previous experience that convinced them that working with specific others or working together at all was a bad idea. Now, if you've ever been in this field, I have had many ideas that were a bad idea. That it seemed like a good idea, but once you started working with the person, their objective or their motive was totally different from yours. And so that over the years, I've learned to screen what I'm involved with. I don't just accept anybody. I don't just work with any organization. We got to be on the same path. We got to be on the same, you got to want the same thing, and objectives have to be the same. So you do have to be able to do that, and you have to be aware that there are people that have their own motives for things. But if we're fighting the crime of human trafficking, our number one goal should be saving lives and making sure that this is not happening in our community. And so you want players that have the same objective as you. So the dominance, another thing is the dominance of professionals and other elite. As you can see, Carolyn showed you in her slide, you have a lot of professionals and you need all those professionals. You need law enforcement, you need the healthcare providers, you need lawyers and other people that have various positions as we shared with you this week. However, you need the valuable community member, you need the valuable rural villager. You need all of those people as a coalition, because those are that's where you're going to learn how you need to tweak everything that you do so that everyone where you are in your community benefits. It helps you to learn how to fix the problems. You're gonna have to learn different ways to communicate with people. Maybe they're illiterate, they can't read. That doesn't mean you can't empower them about human trafficking. You absolutely can. You will just have to use another means of doing it. And that's that's the things that we want you to be aware of. So I wanted to just reiterate that, let you know that that is really important about the obstacles. So. And then I wanted to give you the steps when you're forming a coalition. You definitely, number one, you want to analyze the program's objectives and determine whether to form a coalition. If your biggest issue, and it's always the issue everywhere that we have seen, there's a lack of awareness. A lack of awareness of this crime continues to help the traffickers continue to traffic and take advantage of vulnerable people. And so we know that that's the number one thing, anybody that I work with, that's the number one thing, human trafficking awareness. Because when you know about something, you're protected. You know this crime is happening. If you have a family, you can educate them. Whatever someone teaches us, if you went to school, you went to college, nobody can ever take away what's in your head. That's something you're gonna have. If you teach people whatever method you can, even people that are illiterate. I've had people that were not able to verbally communicate. I have one situation where the parents had, this young lady had a learning disability, and she was not verbal. She was nonverbal. And what was happening is every weekend on a certain part of the month, she would go missing for like 3 days. And when she would come home, they didn't know where she was. The person that was picking her up would pick her up from her home and traffic her every month for a couple days during that month. And then they would bring her back home, and the parents she would be sick, and they would take her to the doctor and find out that she had sexually transmitted diseases. And so they knew that something was happening, but she was nonverbal. She couldn't tell them. So they brought her to the center. And when they brought her to the center, I was thinking to myself, wow, I don't know what I can do. But then I thought, well, we have to figure something out, because we cannot allow her to continue to be victimized because she is unable to speak. So what we did with her is simply took a symbol that is very popular that most people learn. It's a circle with an X through it. When you see that circle with an X through it, it's like a warning, be aware. this represents danger. So what I did is I took that circle and I put in there all the other people outside of her family members, all different people, because I didn't know who was doing this. I didn't know if it was a male or female, what color they were. I didn't know any of that. But I wanted her to know what was safe and what was unsafe. And using that one symbol, which is a circle with an X in it, which is a universal thing here, it means beware, don't do it. And that right there stopped what was happening to her. And the parents drove a long distance to bring her to the center. And I was able just to use that, and it stopped her from being victimized. And so you have to sometimes think outside the box. I really didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was determined, I'm gonna think of something, because it's really unfair to her to be victimized just because she can't communicate what's happening to her and someone's taking advantage of that. So these are examples of why you gotta do things different and be willing to do things different to save people. So step 2 is you gotta recruit the right people. One thing that I believe in, I call them dream crushers. Where you see the center today would have never happened had I listened or not been around the right people. I don't need you to, discourage me about what I'm able to do. So when you're forming anything, you want to make sure that it's people that's like-minded. If they are naysayers are people that, oh, you can't, they just think of it's not gonna work. I don't want to hear that. I don't want you on my team. I want people on there that even if it doesn't look like it, we're gonna do it. And I can tell you everything that we've done it started with no resources. But it started with people that believed in the vision I had, and they just got behind it and believed it. And that's what you have to do. You might be the only one. It may be 1 or 2 people, but make sure that you recruit the right people for this, because that is how you're going to be effective. Step 3, you got to devise a set of preliminary objectives and activities. You got to be specific. What are you going to work on? You can't work on everything. What are going to be your objectives and your activities? And then number 4, you convene the coalition. You get it going, you get it started. It doesn't take a lot, but it's something that's very powerful and can make an impact. And you can do it with nothing but education that you know and that you will learn as you learn things in this week's training. So that is a little bit about forming a coalition. That is what part of our global initiative is with any country that we're working with. That's our goal, because you got to find out what's available in the country. What do you have? What is lacking? What are the gaps in services? You might have shelters. Do you have services for victims? What is happening? What is happening with the victims? What services are they being provided? Where's the shelters? You got to know, where is everything available in your country, in your community, in your village? What is available? How do people know what is available? So that is very important. And I see that from the registration, there were lots of different organizations on there. Do you know each other? Do you know what these organizations do? Or is it your first time seeing people from these organizations on there? That is the benefit of a coalition. You know who are in your community and what they provide. If they're outside your country, what do they provide that our country doesn't have? How can we team up and make sure that we provide the best services for those who are victimized? How can we team up to provide the most awareness that we can cover the whole continent and make sure that traffickers know this is not where you want to come to take advantage? How about coming here and developing some economic opportunities, developing some jobs for people? So this is the power of a coalition when you get it together. And that's our goal for our global initiative. We're not coming just to do a training. We're coming to make impact. I don't believe in wasting time with anything. When I get involved in something, I want to see a change. And I know that awareness is something that is easy to do and is very impactful. So that's the presentation on coalition, the benefit of it, how to get it started, and what can happen when you have one. Now, in the chat, every day I've been reviewing some of the things that we didn't get to because it was some days we had lots of questions. If you have a question, I don't know if we have anything in there.
We do.
Okay, so let me stop and answer some of these questions.
The first one is, should we refer to survivors as survivors or victims?
So that's a term that we have a little bit of controversy here.
Mhm.
When people first come in, we consider them, this is the way I view it, I consider them a victim. They've just been introduced to us. But as they stay here, they become a survivor. And as they continue to go through all the programs and services, they become what we call a thriver. Because you're number one, you're victimized, but then you become a survivor. You're getting empowered. You're taking your life back. You're making changes. You're implementing all the things that are being offered to you. Then you become a thriver. So it depends on where you are. This is how I view everyone. When they first arrive here, they're a victim. But as they receive services, they become a survivor because our goal is to empower them. That's why we're called an empowerment center, because we're not just we're giving them information that's going to change their life. When you become empowered, your life changes. And that's the goal. Then it's important that they move from survivor to thriver. So victim to survivor to thriver. When they get to that thriver stage, they make a great impact. They're doing things, they've taken their life back. As the young lady that I showed you earlier, that was a survivor that now became our yoga instructor. I mean, she's a real estate mogul. She has homes, she's doing all kinds of things. And that is what we consider a thriver. Next question.
Okay, this is amazing information. Thank you so much. But have you ever had issues with individuals in coalition giving information to traffickers?
Everywhere you go, and probably in other countries, you may see that a lot, where but there's people where they'll come in and they may try to gather information. Like I've actually had traffickers sit outside our old center, but they weren't bold enough to come in. But I had one trafficker that had a girl in the car, but the girl that was working for him, she refused to work for him unless she could come to the group. She's like, I have to go to the group. Now, anybody else would have said, don't let her, why is she still coming to the group? She's with her. But I wanted her to come because she finally got away from that trafficker. But I thought that was interesting. So it's very important that you don't allow someone that even if they're corrupt, because you will have people that they might be corrupt. You may see this a lot in other countries, lots of corruption. But once you identify them, then you know that there's someone that should not be in your group, in your coalition. And that is why you just don't bring everybody together. If we find corruption here, like in our coalition, these are people who are working for agencies who are joining the coalition. So if you got somebody corrupt working for your agency, we should be free to share the information. Our objective should not be anything we're working on the crime. If somebody's sharing, something about where a shelter is, it's like, that's where you have to develop your rules about what you're going to be focusing on that. And then when you identify someone that is corrupt or doing something inappropriate, then they have to be removed. Another question?
Yes. Have you ever met a situation that you realized you have made a coalition with a trafficker? If yes, what did you do?
So it's different here because we would identify them. There you have it's a more challenging situation, but it's very important that you have people that have experience. Like people, I can walk around and just see, I don't know why I can do it, but I can. And it's maybe because it's been years of doing it, I can just identify them. I don't care how well dressed they are, how educated they are. It'll just be something in me that I will feel that there's something wrong with this person. It will be the way that they respond. That's why you want someone that has knowledge to set it up. It doesn't mean that someone might get in that is not, you know, could still do it. But remember, it's more powerful there's more powerful people than they are the ones that might get in and try to shut something down. You don't let them. You stick together because there's more people. Everybody that's on here, I can tell you're on here for a reason. You want to fight this crime.
That's it.
Is that it?
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm good. I'm glad you had those questions. If you have anything else, we got a little bit more time. What I'm going to do is I wanted to go through some of the things that we seen in the chat that we didn't get to. One of the things, and this was from Love Justice Malawi. I'm just telling the name of the organization, not the person, but you asked about being able to do something like a fair, something you were interested in doing a fair where there's no speakers and the people are just getting resources. And we want to share with you what we're about to do here in the United States that you can totally do. So we want to encourage you with this. So this is a resource fair, and it is one of the locations that I showed you at Outreach that was on a church parking lot. This is why it's so important to work with everybody in your community. I don't care if it's a store, whatever. This church doesn't have any money, but they have a big lot, a big old piece of land. And because they have that land, that was the attractive thing. And they're in a neighborhood where there's lots of people being trafficked, lots of crime, lots of violence. And all they really had was this parking lot. So 8 years ago, we went there and started something called, we did this there before we did Outreach. It was called the Resource and Empowerment Fair. I am big on making people understand what is available, because sometimes when people feel hopeless, they don't even have the strength to look for something that can help them. So my thought was, let's bring everything to one place. So when they come in, they don't have to go here, there, and everywhere. They might not have transportation. It might be many things that hinder them from going to all these places. However, if you have a fair, you bring all the resources together. If you have 4 organizations, bring them all together in this one place. It could be a beach. You don't have to, in our case, it's a parking lot of a church where people drive in to go to church on Sundays. And so this big lot was available. It could be a piece of grass. It could be anywhere. It could be a park, whatever you have. Here, we use their lot. So this is the pastor and his wife in the picture. So this is how we promote it. We do a simple flyer. We post it on social media. The church gives it out in their to the congregation, and they have they put it on their sign. And we want to show you what is done at the fair. So that's a little bit about our advertisement. We're not talking about human trafficking here, because all the time you don't have to make that the boldest statement. We say fun for the whole family, but you better believe when they get in there, they're gonna get information about human trafficking. But also they can bring their kids, they can have fun. We have over 20 resource organizations that participate, 20 plus. Sometimes we've had 25. I think this year we're up to 22. 23. Right now we have 23, and we still have time because it's August 12th. So we'll, up until the time, we'll still be taking on more. So that's a lot of resources in one place that people get a chance to go up to the tables. No one is making any money. This is not to be for money making. It is to serve the community, to give them the resources to let them know what is available, to educate them on things that they need to be educated on. It's the perfect opportunity to provide that human trafficking awareness. So these are some of the stations we wanted you to see. So we have like a painting station. So arts is really big. Everybody likes art. Kids like art, families like art. So there's stations where people can come and do activities. So we have like a painting station where people can come, create pictures and paint and enjoy themselves. And then these people here are from the church. These are church members that, you know, they don't have any money to offer any, but they, you know what they have to offer? A wonderful, beautiful smile. And so that's what you want. You want people who are at your fair to welcome the community. You don't want people that's got a bad attitude or, you know, they're unfriendly. And this was during COVID, so we still did it. That's why some of the people have masks on. We didn't let COVID stop us. We just followed the safety procedures, but we still had the fair. And so these were the members of that church who were able to give of themselves, which is a warm smile and a friendly greeting. When you look here, you'll see all the different tables for all the different organizations that we're setting up. And then we had a sign right at the gate of the church so that the community driving by, walking by would know this is our annual thing. Now, we learned 8 years ago that whenever you make a sign, you don't have to have a printed sign. There's so many artists in these communities. Somebody can make this on a sheet. Somebody can make it a simple thing, just paint it and say, this is the fair that is happening, and people will come. And at the bottom, again, these are some more of the church members who we gave different jobs to. They were in charge of directing the traffic, and they felt so proud to be able to direct the traffic and welcome people into this church lot. And then here we have some volunteers who work at our outreach efforts who were responsible for barbecuing and cooking the hot dogs, which is something that we provided, because you have to have food. Food is an attraction no matter where you are. People like to eat. So but hot dogs here is a hot dog here is pretty cheap. So you can get it and people love them. And so they were able to have that. The smell of something barbecuing and cooking is also an attraction. And then these are some of the other stations I wanted you to see what you can do that doesn't require. We had a volunteer, her job was just to read to the children. The children sat around her, we had tons of books, and she just read to groups of kids as they stopped by, and she was busy all day. So just having that time, it doesn't take a lot. It could be something simple. Sitting there, a person sitting there, reading stories to kids. And then we had other stations where people were giving out personal care items and school supplies. So when we do this fair here, it's time for the children to prepare to go back to school. So that's why we do it in August, so that they can come to the fair. We can assist the parents in providing with some of the supplies that the children need. So that would be a good thing that, businesses, this is how we get these things to be able to do. We get businesses and organizations to help us. Whatever you have there, there's somebody there that has a business or organization that would be willing to help. Most of the time, people haven't asked them. When you have something organized, people are more apt to want to help what you're doing. When we first started, we didn't have that many people. We just had a few people, but we kept doing it. And now every year we're able to get more people to help provide donations. So here we had a station where they could get the little tattoos painted on them. So that's a talent that anybody has that's an artist. Get some little paint and they would make little logos or little things that kids like on their arms and different things. And everybody, if you look at each thing, they're given a choice. They're not told what to do. You pick out the one you want. So these are some of the stations, the painting station, kids getting school supplies, volunteers helping the people with the painting. This is how we get, I wanted to share, this is how we get the community involved and raising awareness and helping us do these things, because it takes, materials, it takes donations, it takes people to help get school supplies for kids. And we need people to help buy the food that we're gonna serve to the people. And sometimes that's some individuals. A lot of times it's not a big companies or organizations. However, at this particular fair, over the years, we've been able to get a couple of big businesses. The last couple years, we have a car dealership, one car dealership that started. That dealership here in the United States, they just sell lots of cars to people. And so one of the volunteers that have been helping us knew someone there. She reached out to that person, told them what we were doing, and that dealership decided to get involved, and they began to collect school supplies for this fair. And at the people that were buying cars would come into their dealership, see the sign about this fair, and they could drop off, school supplies there. So you will be amazed at how people will work with you to help, because they want to be involved in something that is good. Everybody is not corrupt, and everybody doesn't want, people want to help. And there's a lot of people that are willing to help when you find that see that you have an ethical organization, and that you are doing what you say that you're doing, because nobody wants to fund something that people are going to use the money in the wrong way. So when you prove yourself, people are willing to come forward and help you. And so these are some examples. You see the little kids in the corner here? These are what we call Boy Scouts. These little kids, they go camping, but they collected all the stuff for our outreach. So even children are involved in doing things, and that's really important. Also, we have here where there's groups, little community groups, church groups. They can't come, but they want to help. So they'll bag up things, collect things, and then bring them to us. Down here, what we have here is a big organization called the YWCA? YMCA. And so they're big here, and they took on collecting items for us, which was amazing, because there was a lot of different people who had a lot more access. So we got a lot of really, really nice items that we were able to give out at these fairs and at our outreach services. So I wanted to show you the variety of things to do. This picture here is this woman here sitting in this chair. Her name is Erica Gold, and she is a Holocaust survivor. One other thing that you want to remember is that this is a picture of our old center. Mm-hmm. So you can see look how little it was and how many people were crammed in there. We only had this one little room, and this little room back there was my little office. And our program coordinator, Tracy, was right here in that little spot behind the wall. And this little pink thing here was the bathroom. That's all we had. So I was glad that this picture was in there, but we used to pack people in there and do human trafficking awareness and survivor stories. One thing you want to remember is how you can take a survivor and empower the community. And even their stories might be different. We've had people that are victims of torture, victims of different things from different countries, but they're still a survivor, and their stories are powerful to the people. And so we use all of these opportunities, and this was an opportunity of awareness when we were in our little tiny building. I don't know, is there any questions on there?
Yes.
Okay, we'll stop and answer questions.
We have two good ones.
Okay, good.
A coalition is the same as a contract. In a case of breach of contract, what do you do to ensure that the program is not affected?
Okay, so we don't look at it as a contract here. You just that's why when you're establishing the coalition, you set the rules, you set the guidelines. It's basically you're coming together to talk about what services your organization provides. What are you going to work on? So for example, for us, establishing a coalition through our global initiative means that we want to work with organizations who are fighting human trafficking, whether they provide awareness or they provide services to the victims. That's what we're interested in. We're not interested in anything else. What do you do to provide awareness? What services do your organization provide? Those are the two things. So there's nothing really to break. You're coming to the table sharing what you do. We're going to tell you what we do. And then together, our goal is to provide awareness in your country, in your community, share ideas of how you can make this happen in your area. So there's really no opportunity for anything like that. It's you're coming, if you're a legitimate organization and you're coming with your organization, we're gonna know, what does your organization do? I've been looking at the organizations on the list that have been on this training. I'm interested to know, what do you provide in your organization? Are you a service provider, or are you a shelter? Or are you a social worker? Are you a professional that is helping the victims? This is how you build a coalition. So there's no worry about someone, breaking. It's not a contract. It's a opportunity to work together to make sure that you're more powerful together. If you have a victim and you don't have anywhere for them to go, you don't even know where the shelter is, or you don't know how to provide services to the victim, then you're not going to be effective. So the coalition is bringing all the stuff together so that if I'm in Malawi and you're in Zambia and we both have different programs, if I can't help it, maybe you got something over there that can help. We're going to come together, put our heads together, and we're going to see that in our different countries, we might be seeing different scenarios of trafficking. How are we going to attack that with awareness? That's what a coalition is. So if someone wants to sit in on a coalition and they don't have anything to bring to the table, you're going to know that they're not the ones that belong there. You want legitimate organizations who have established practices. They're a service provider, they're a shelter, or they are in the working profession. As Carolyn showed you the variety of people that she brings in. And you definitely, specifically in other countries, you want people who live in the community. You want people that can't read too. You have to don't go by whether they have a talent or whatever. Those are some of the most valuable people, the people that people are ignoring. Those are the ones that are going to give you the best information that you can have. I actually have a group of ladies who are active on the street. They're being trafficked, but they're too afraid to leave. So I meet with them. I try to meet with them at least once a month. And I've been meeting with them for years. They don't come to the physical center. They're afraid to come to the center. And I respect that. So I meet them at a particular location. And they do it. They become empowered enough to get all the people together for me, because I don't have time to contact all the people that are in there. I'm like, you get them together and I'm going to show up. And that's what happens. And they're empowered to do that. And what they tell me is so powerful that it helps me develop things. And then when they'll see something on our website and they'll see that I've listened to them and I've developed that thing. And that is powerful. So you don't want to eliminate community members. You don't want to eliminate people just because they're not educated. You want to find the best way to make them feel involved. There's such power when you bring everybody together. And remember how I talked about the obstacles of people that just because you have a degree or just because you're in a specific profession, everybody has value and worth, and everybody has good input. And I can tell you from experience, I've gotten some of the best input from the people that other people have wrote off, the best input. So you definitely don't want to eliminate people for that.
Really good one.
Uh-huh.
Is it important to sign a memorandum of understanding for a coalition to be effective? There's 3 parts to this one.
Absolutely. So for organizations that we work with, a memo of understanding is definitely great. And that is something that we are going to definitely do with any country we work with that is going to have a coalition. Because one thing that I believe in is, clear understanding of what the role is of each individual. In that memo of understanding, when we work with people, they specifically state what they are going to do as part of their partnership with us. I'm going to do A, B, and C. And then I'm going to tell them that we are going to do A, B, and C. Our global initiatives are very specific. Sometimes I might go outside a little bit depending on what it is. Like this training was not part of what one of our goals are, but it was needed. And so I was willing to do it. But it's very specific. So being in other countries, when we develop a coalition with any country we're working with, we will definitely want a memo of understanding with each of those organizations. That way, it's very clear what you're bringing to the table and what your organization is going to do. Now, if you don't hold up to it, there's no point in being in a coalition. And but when people know what is expected of them, they know if you're coming with the right motive and you're coming with what is expected of you and you're ready to do your part, get ready for great impact. What's the second part?
What do you include in the coalition's agreement that helps that such a coalition does not hijack the participating organization's autonomy nor compromise on the self-understanding of such organizations?
Okay, so you be very clear. You start off with us, what our goal will be is to focus on human trafficking awareness. Is the biggest thing that you can do to save lives, is make people aware of the crime. So there is nothing more that you need to do and other than bring what your services are. You don't have to share about your clientele. You don't have to share about anything. We just want to know, what do you provide? Are you a shelter provider? How do people get into your shelter if they need shelter? Are you a service provider? What services would you provide? And what is the process for someone to get into your services? It's that simple. So when we come together, we're working on the issue of human trafficking awareness, launching a campaign in that particular country, that particular city. So our goal is to know from you, what are you seeing as a human trafficking issue in your area? What you see on this training, what we see is completely different from what you're seeing in Africa. It's some of the scenarios can be, we know it's about vulnerability, but in each geographic location, it could be something different. And so the way that we provide awareness may have to be a little bit different. It needs to be culturally sensitive. There's a lot of factors. That's the only thing you need to bring to a coalition that we're forming. That's all we're interested in. What are you seeing? What type of trafficking? And how are we going? What services can you provide? And is it all organized together where people can know what's available? If you have all these services and nobody know they're available, it doesn't do any good. But if you come together, you don't have to worry. You shouldn't be sharing anything sensitive. You don't have to share any of that. We have one goal: empower the community with the information about this crime. Empower the community that if you are a victim, here are the services available. That's all you have to do. So therefore, you don't worry about somebody hijacking, because we're only in for one goal. There's nothing to hijack. We come to save lives. We come to make an impact. And so you don't have to worry about that.
You answered all of it.
Did I answer all that? Okay, perfect. Good questions. Let's see what else we got. Okay, so Love Justice of Malawi. I just want people to know these questions. I'm looking at all these chats. And I don't know what this festival is. I'm gonna look it up. But whatever this festival is, the Sand Festival, and it was something else, I forget. But I wanted to come up with an image because I didn't want this training to end with you feeling that you can't do it, because you can. And even when there are little to no resources, I came up with this image of people sitting on the beach in Malawi, having a human trafficking awareness presentation before the Sand Festival. Now, I don't really know what the Sand Festival is, but I'm gonna look it up and find out more about it. But it must be a big thing that attracts a lot of tourists. And whenever you have big events like we have here, that you heard from the lady that presented on soap, that attracts more trafficking. Any big event that brings people in to your communities, there's a high, especially if they're big sporting events here in the United States, any kind of big sporting events. And that's when we get on guard. Whenever there's big things, that's when we go for lots of human trafficking awareness, lots of information passed out, more information and outreach. So this is just an example. I wanted to leave you because I'm a very visual person. I wanted to leave you with a thought in your mind that even if you just had the beach and the people over there got a sheet with the sign on it, you can get the attention of people about be aware of human trafficking. And the people are sitting there listening to the presentation. You can do something as simple as that and make impact and change. So I wanted to make sure that you've seen that. And then we have been, want to really thank all of the people, all the presenters that presented this week, because everybody here in the United States is the same everywhere. You have a lot of people, it's a big job, and we have small staffs working on all these things. So I really appreciate everyone that was a part of this 5-day training, because it was a lot, getting people together, all the technology, but we were grateful to every presenter who came on and shared during this 5 days. So special thanks to you if you're still online in the United States. We appreciate you. I want to let all the participants know that we do have a certificate of training completion that will be emailed to you. I received a registered list of people that attended this training, and we do have a certificate that we are going to send to you. Now, we're small, so we want you to be patient. We're gonna get them out to you as soon as we can. But if you're registered, then you're gonna get one. Also, we will also notify you about when you can view copies of the video presentations. They were recorded. Only one day we had a fluke, and one day is not recorded. Wednesday. That presentation was so good, but that one wasn't recorded. But however, we're going to send you all the presenter slides so that you have all the materials that were discussed. So that will be included as well. So we thank you. I don't think there's any more questions.
Well, there was a question about the sand, I looked it up, the Sunbird Sand Music Festival. She was asking.
Okay.
For the music, it's annual. It's been in Malawi since 2009.
Okay.
It's a hallmark event that draws thousands of tourists together, local people, business, youth, community organizations, media, and visitors from all over the world to celebrate Malawi's richness, diversity, dynamism, and heritage.
Okay. Okay, good. So we got some information on that. Okay, well, we thank you for attending this global initiative, 5-day training. I feel like I've met every single one of you. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And we look forward to possibly seeing you in the future on other things that we do in our global initiative. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.